Hello, my dears. Welcome to this episode of Moms Who Poll. My name is Andrea, and I am your most average mom who polls. Today, I am speaking with Misty. She is the owner and founder of Tribu Fitness and Dance, which is a company that does retreats that focus on the pole dancer holistically. Misty, I believe you have a new retreat that is coming out called Untamed.
Yes. Our retreat in July will be from July 16th through the 21st. It's called Untamed, a sacred rewilding. And we have partnered with Xpole. They're sponsoring this retreat and all of our retreats coming in 2023 and 24.
Thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. And yes, that's perfect. Yes. Very holistic look at dancers and performers in the industry.
That is really exciting. So tell me a little bit about yourself for anyone who doesn't know who you are. How long have you been polling? You're a mom as well. Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, I've only been pole dancing since early 2021. It was kind of in the tail end of COVID. I had gone to one class before COVID hit and shut everything down. So I don't have the years and years of pole experience. I do have a vast background in gymnastics. I grew up as a competitive gymnast. And so that all kind of translated over. I've also got years of dance behind me and just kind of got into pole after just having, I think everyone had a really tough year through COVID. Some of us had really transformative years, and some of that transformation was bumpy and not so pleasant. And I think mine was of that kind of swath. And so I had just gotten really I kind of not in a really healthy place emotionally or physically. And I am a personal trainer. That is the other thing that we do at Tribu is personal training and nutrition. And here I was withering physically and emotionally. And I had my best friend was like, we're going to go dance. And that had always been a really beautiful outlet for me and something that had obviously not been available through COVID. But she took me to a pole dancing class, and I initially was so incredibly intimidated. And I was there. I think, everybody goes to pole in what makes them comfortable. But what I went to pole in those first handful of classes versus what I go to dance pole in now, vastly different. I think I had on long sleeves, long pants, and a mask, of course. And, but I just, despite like sweating into my mask and breathing my own sweat for an hour, I was like, I am in love. I am absolutely in love. And it had the transformative effect that the art and sport has had for me has just been incredible.
That's so awesome. So what is it about pole that you feel made it that transformative experience for you? Was it the tricks? Was it the community aspect? What was that?
Oh, certainly there was a huge part of it that was the community of women. I feel like all of the things kind of came together, and I have a really hard time like splitting hairs over what part of pole dance matters most or is most important to me. And some days it's different than others. But I definitely have a need to physically push myself. I've raced endurance races in my past, and I've definitely had just that part of my personality has always been there. So certainly the tricks and that kind of thing is those more harder physical aspects are a really important piece for me. But the artistry and being able to fully embody kind of my whole self and be in a room full of women who held space for that. And we're also doing that. So it was, I can remember the first few classes thinking everybody is staring at me. And then I had this realization, no one is staring at me. Everyone's watching. So that was so good for me too. Cause then I was like, oh, wait, we're all on our own journey. We're just all in the same room doing it. And so being able to like really tap into what is my sexuality, why do I express certain components of that and not others? And where is shame popping up? And why am I not able to fully embody my whole self, and tapping into that more and more and more as I danced more and more and more, and seeing that the artistic part of that develop in a really big kind of well-rounded way has given me just, I can't say that I would move through the world anywhere near what I do now without that, especially coming out of COVID, especially coming out of all of the things that happened for so many of us during that time. It was really healing for me.
That's awesome. And I think you had said this to me before. I think we had this conversation where we were talking about, especially, moms, like after you give birth, like we tend to have a harder time connecting with that part of ourselves that, we feel like, I don't know, lost that, or perhaps we're not sure how to navigate in this new like post-mom era. And like all of us going through COVID, we're navigating in this like COVID or post-COVID, whatever you want to call it, era where we went through this big, crazy change where everything felt uncertain, not unlike that, that newborn phase when you first get that little baby. And and then it's, how do I go forward now with my body, with my relationship with myself and others, because there's no take backs. It's not like you can erase the fact that you now have this little person with you, or that the pandemic happened. In a way, it's not the same, but it is a transformative process.
Oh, certainly. And I had an 8th grader and 9th grader through COVID. So really hard ages. And in a lot of ways, I think one of the things I was dealing with is that the independence and the ground I had gained, kind of having some autonomy as they had gotten a little older, COVID robbed that completely from all of us, really. But, I was cooking 3 meals a day. My whole world revolved around and my kids were amazing at making sure their schoolwork was done. They did a great job with what they were handed, but still I was taking care of school. I was taking care of food. I was taking care of an ill parent. I was taking care of, a business that was like, what are we doing? How are we managing this? This is going to completely wreck us. And taking care of all of that for what ended up being, 20 hours a day some days, and under the stress of, well, if I leave to go get groceries, am I going to bring something home that kills everyone in my house? That was a tremendous amount of stress. And in a lot of ways, it felt a lot like the isolation that happened right after I gave birth. Especially to my first child, because I didn't have a community of women at that point with other babies. And so I was really lost. I remember being so lost and feeling so alone with him when he was an infant. You get past the postpartum thing and you're feeling better and your body's better, but you're mentally kind of just still in shambles. You don't know what to do. You don't know how to leave the house. And it's so many correlations to that newborn time era that with COVID and then we all came out of it and we're just supposed to be normal again, and I was not normal. I think it does. And moms took a huge hit during COVID. I think every study now that has looked at it shows that we carried all of the weight, of all the people in the whole world. Because we were keeping the world go around, but it was not easy. It was not easy. And I think, just, man, what I wouldn't have given though, to have somebody take me to a pole dance class after, when I was postpartum, like, healed up and able to exercise again, what I wouldn't have given, because what it has done, what that would have done for my postpartum like body image too. That would have been amazing.
Right. Just to see, I mean, it's not that, pole dancing is all women. Like we have men, we're a gender fluid environment, but it has a lot of what goes on in a studio is inherently feminine energy. And so to feel comfortable in a place where you can just exist as you are in your body as it is right now, and it's not good, it's not bad, it's just existing, is
Right.
so healing and so comforting to a
Mhm.
lot of what we go through where we feel alone and isolated. And I think everyone coming out of what's happened the last few years has experienced what that feeling
Mhm.
alone and isolated might be like. I think
Yeah.
that's so interesting that you dove right in, and I know you've got your background in gymnastics and dance and endurance sports, so it was, a great way to apply your physical skill set to something that was so, artistic,
Mhm.
and more of an art form. And so you got involved in Enter the Garden. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct. And that is a production company based here in Asheville, North Carolina. It is two women that I dance with and have danced with from the beginning of the time that I started dancing, and one of their husbands. And so there's a 3-person production team, and they just made a decision very, very, very early in their formation process that they wanted to put on these shows, this stage-based pole-centric shows, very theatrical, really super entertaining, without reining in as much as you possibly can. There are still we have county guidelines where we can't show female nipples because those are very, very bad, apparently. So like we have some things we have to do, and we absolutely follow those rules. But we don't rein in your sexual expression, right? So the dancers are able to choreograph and really express and embody the character that they're playing, and really fully. So they wanted that to be the case. They wanted it to be something different than a competition or showcase, because it would have this thread of plot line running through it. And but the biggest thing that they did for our community is say, this will be an ethically run show and our dancers are getting paid.
That is so awesome.
Yeah. I mean, and the amount of money that they've invested in us having professional lights and sound systems and stages, and that money has not come back to our production team yet. And they're still paying performers first. And that to me just speaks, I mean, it speaks volumes to the way that the industry needs to go.
Yeah, I agree with you there. It's one of those hard things, and you see it across, art forms, and pole is no exception, that people will be asked to perform for exposure, or
Mhm.
you can give this so people will know who you are. And it's like, but wait a minute, you knew who I was, and that's how, I was selected to be in this show. Why is my time not monetarily valued? I mean, we've all agreed in the US that, we're using money as a form of compensation, not likes. So why not? So that, I think,
Right.
yeah.
And it's funny because there's so, like, dancers of all stripe, any kind of dancer, and this has been going on forever, way before pole dance was put in video, music videos and on stage with Snoop Dogg, which he, by the way, paid his dancers very well. I found that out firsthand. So like
Oh,
he paid his dancers really well, which, I mean, of course, Snoop is going to like push against industry commonality and be like, no, I'll do my thing. So, but there has been a history of dancers not being paid, and this is a great opportunity for you. And I had this dancer turn to me when we were having this conversation at one point, and she was like, at what point do you just look at them and go, opportunity for what? I'm literally standing on the stage that is my dream, and you're not paying me. So what opportunity is there?
right.
And that is true. It's true.
Yes.
She was like, we bring the work that these dancers, especially on stage, are putting in, the prep work, all of the money to costuming, all of the things that go into it. And they are professionals. And so I definitely I love that he paid them. I can't speak for any other artist. Maybe they're getting paid in other places too, but I love that story so much.
I think that's great. And I think it's great too that this production company is looking to invest in their, in their company as a whole by ensuring that dancers are paid, because when you're paying people, an ethical wage, then that in turn kind of, it's like a positive feedback loop. You're going to get more from them. You're going to get more notoriety. And in a way, it's almost like they're providing exposure for themselves, if that makes sense, because good news travels fast. I think that's really interesting, that they would start going in the hole that way just to help advance the industry as a whole. That's really fantastic.
Yeah, it really speaks to their character so much. And we have had several really well-known pole dancers come and dance in our production. So Leah she's known nationwide for, she's like, nobody brings the show like Leah does. Leah brings a show when she comes. And Medusa Mommy, who's right out of Charlotte, and she was just a couple hours from me, and amazing, she's incredible and under like a lot of demand. So for her to take the time to come to Asheville is also super amazing. And then two dancers out of Chicago, Dalton and Sophia, they're at Fly Club there, and both go by their first names. And they've come back now for 3 shows. Because they believe in the show, because their efforts are rewarded. So they come all the way in from Chicago, and now they are amazing dancers. So we're very, very lucky to have them for sure. But it's also really, it's really great to see how much they love the production and the production company. These 4 specific dancers in general have been with us from the beginning. So they've danced in every show, and you get amazing people when you treat them well.
That's awesome. And so what has your experience in the show been like? So how did you get involved, and what was it like creating your performances for this production?
Oh, it was great. The first show was actually, it was a little bit kind of last minute. So I live in Costa Rica part-time. And that is why the retreat is happening in Costa Rica. So I live in Costa Rica part-time, and had planned to be back in Costa when the show was happening in November, and had some personal things happen and needed to extend. So I figured this out a handful of weeks before, and was given the opportunity to kind of take this adjunct part where there would normally be like pole kittens, to come on and clean poles in between for like a studio performance or something, and create a character out of it. So a friend of mine and I got together, and because it's Enter the Garden, and it is very much about, it's taking place, the old plot line was taking place like in a forest, and this young girl is like basically turning away from all of her conditioning, her societal conditioning, and embracing herself. So a lot of it's very witchy and foresty and whatever. So, and then the whole garden theme, I was like, we need to be the snake in the garden. So we had like snake costuming and makeup, and we like would slither on stage, and then eventually we would clean the pole, but we were totally just these like little flirty kind of nymphy type characters in between every act. But it ended up being that we were doing like minute to minute and a half long solos.
That's great.
Every act. And it was really great. It was so much fun. And so when they announced the second run of the show, which was going to be 2 shows, Friday night, Saturday night performances, I auditioned with my friend Emily, another friend, and we actually ended up having a duet to a song called Black Magic Woman, which is the Victory band. It was like a different take on that song, a little bit more modern take on it. But just very, again, we were totally allowed to embrace our characters in this, and kind of that turning inward, as the character turning inward to embrace what society has called dark, and what society has called maybe too naughty or too seductress, not a good girl, and kind of, running away from that until you run right into it, and kind of then seducing that part of yourself to come out to the rest of the world. And it was amazing. It was incredibly transformative. Was not, as things are, it was not a linear progression. So, we had times that we individually or together failed emotionally. We had failed attempts at things. We had failed attempts at tricks. We had failed attempts at choreo, and we had failed attempts sometimes at just being present in the piece. And the space that was held for us during that was like, it was space for the piece, but it was also like space for us as humans to kind of go, oh, let me hang on, let me adjust, let me grow, let me evolve a second. And this is messy. And everyone was fine with it being messy. And I watched that happen across basically every single person in the cast. And so our cast is obviously very close, but the safe container that the Enter the Garden provided for that growth and for that like exploration of self and embodiment during the first show is when I was like, oh, more women need this. More people need this. How can we do this? And I had this like seed planted for a retreat. And then during the second show, it really took hold and I just could not shake it. I was like, this has got to happen. And I have no idea how. I don't know why this is in my spirit, but it is. And I was not back. And I left to go back to Costa Rica just days after the second show. And as soon as I got back, things started just happening. And so I got a call about a facility. And then I was like, well, I'll call Leah and Medusa, and I'm sure they're going to say no. And I called Roxy and told her that, who is one of our other main characters. She's a local dancer who's amazing. And I called her and told her that. And she's like, I don't know, you should just pitch it to them and see. And so I did. And they both said yes. And I was like, what are we doing? We're doing a retreat. So that has been the trajectory. And it has been this incredible collaboration, 5 women who've come together, and we have literally just started from scratch. We all put our brains on the table and we were like, what do I have to bring to create a container for women to grow, to really explore, to be safe, to like figure out what it is that they're hiding from or hiding from everyone else and why, and can that be embodied in a way that makes them a healthier and more full human. Most of these women are moms. A lot of them are, all of us are friends and sisters, and we're all operating in this world. So, but I think especially for moms, because we do lose that piece of us so quickly when our kids are born. Once we have that container again, and we're able to kind of reach down and like grab that piece of us, how we show up for our kids is so different and it's so good. And how we show up in the world for each other is so different and so good. So that is the precipice behind the Tribu retreats. And this one, because every retreat that we do will have a different name and a different theme based on who's in it. And this one's called Untamed. And Untamed, a sacred rewilding. So we're going to it'll be very holistic. We're going to be doing like an emotional component with tons of physical dance component added in there. And then also just a lot of where I live in Costa Rica is in Nosara, and it's in the blue zone. So I'm like, we're going to do lots of blue zone sunsets and lots of blue zone food and lots of blue zone healing. So I think it's going to be really great.
That's so exciting. And I wanted you to talk a little bit about, or at least point out, because you had mentioned this to me before when we were chatting earlier, that when it comes to emotional healing, like, it's not like you might be running the thing, but you have an actual licensed person that will be conducting that. It's not like some rando, like off the street. Like you have an actual expert that will be leading those sessions, right?
Right. And her name is Emily Pennystone, and she is a mindset coach. She works primarily she's also a pole dancer. She's actually she was my duet partner in the last Enter the Garden. We're all Enter the Garden, our cast members, all 5 of us. And this is what she does for a living. She normally works with kind of high-powered execs and entrepreneurs that are launching major businesses. She works with another company out of California and works on her own here, based out of Asheville. So she got tons of experience, kind of having people creating a curiosity, helping people facilitate themselves, like through a curiosity of how deep they want to go and what that looks like, and how do I create safety for myself and others in that process, and what's blocking me? Because a lot of times that's, obviously that's not the same thing for everybody, but that can also be a really hard thing to kind of walk through. So the thing that I think makes it easier as dancers is that we can move that through our body. When it gets hard emotionally, I mean, isn't this what pole dance does for everybody? It's so magical in that way. But you get to that hard place and you can go and dance and move it through your body. Have a better understanding of yourself when it's all said and done. And we're really hoping for the container that this retreat will provide to create kind of a springboard for people who come.
That's awesome. And especially because I ask about that because I know, in the last couple of years, it's kind of come up, as like a community topic, right? Like we know that pole does this to us. We know that it's this like healing aspect, but is every pole instructor, supposed to be, a healer or a trauma informed person, right? Like, is that it, so having someone there who is an expert in kind of creating this mindset, creating these, mind pathways for your participants is so important because it's not like, you call me to do that. I'm not going to be your expert,
Right.
like they're like, I can teach a fan kick and character development.
I know. And then we're all bringing separate things. I certainly am not nearly as qualified to teach dance as Roxy, Medusa, and Leah are. These three are incredible instructors. But I can teach you about eating for your dance and nutrition and how to like get the right nutrients and when to get the right nutrients and how to support your body through off pole strength and conditioning. So I can bring that. But I definitely can't teach somebody how to like fix their blocks and like go deep into their mindset. So I think that's been the cool thing about the way that this 5-person team came together is what we're bringing is all so different. The 3 dance specific instructors are bringing 3 incredibly different styles of dance. And then Emily and I, though we dance and are certainly going to be in those classes and helping and that kind of thing. We're not as qualified as they are at that. And then I'm the only certified, nutritionist, personal trainer. Emily is a mindset coach. So we kind of just all came together in this really beautiful way. The other thing that's really interesting is that, and I didn't know, I didn't do a lot of like, obviously the way this all came about, I didn't do a lot of research into what are pole retreats and what is the norm across the industry. I literally didn't do it. And so I had no idea that I think the norm I'm finding out is that you have 1 instructor and we have 3. And I was like, oh, well, that would be like that's not a good fit for us. We need 3.
Well, I think that's interesting you say that because you have 3 plus you have the holistic approach with the mindset and then the nutrition and I think you also said that you would talk about like certain like cross training efforts and things like that to really address the dancer holistically. And I think that's really special about what you're doing. And I think that's great that maybe you didn't do a ton of research because now you know that what you created, it came from you. It's organic. It came from you. It's special to you and unique to you. I know when I started this thing, which I guess we're calling a podcast now, so I got to get comfortable with calling it that.
I think it's officially a podcast.
It's officially a podcast. Like, I feel like my imposter syndrome comes up. I'm like, oh no, it's just me chatting with other women and I'm recording it and I put it out there in case anyone wants to listen. And it's like, that sounds like a podcast. I'm like, oh no.
That sounds exactly like a podcast.
But I think when you create something that's your own, it's not like I'm probably that red flag person. I don't listen to a ton of podcasts. And I think that's a good thing because it allowed me to kind of make sure that what I was creating came from me, that like these conversations I'm having are not coming from somewhere else and I'm like ripping them off, right? Like I'm not taking a Tuesday topic and making it a Tuesday tip and being like, oh, there we go,
Check.
Yeah, done.
I know. I think it does help keep from like creating this arbitrary list in your brain that you're like feeling this need to check off all the things that aren't in alignment with who you are.
Yes, that way you can truly love it and know that it's yours. I think that's so important. And I think what you're creating is truly special. And it's going to be really exciting for the dancers that come and participate in your retreat. Now, so this one that's coming up is in July. Is that right?
Right. And it's the 16th through the 21st in Nosara, Costa Rica. That is, we're holding it at a yoga retreat center called Nexus Institute. And it's just a gorgeous, like, luxury kind of place, but it is in the middle of the jungle. There's a beautiful pool, but there's this incredible giant yoga shala that will be our dance studio for the week. It's all right there together. We have 2 big kitchens. I've hired a local chef to come in and it's actually an all-woman team as well, to come in and I created a menu, and she's going to be catering breakfast and lunch every day. So all of that will be included. Also, something I didn't know people just didn't do, because I was like, I know I can have like the most nutritious food at my fingertips because everything there is so fresh. And I was like, oh, I know exactly what everyone should eat. So, and I'm really used to working around lots of different dietary needs. So we have gluten-free people and vegan people and dairy-free people. And it's so easy with Costa Rican cuisine to be able to work around all of that. It's the most incredible food. So that will be provided every day, fresh juices, coconuts and that kind of thing. So that is all part of it. And that is, yeah. I mean, it just all came together in this really beautiful way. But Nexus is I got back to Costa Rica, and within 2 days I had contact from a friend who was like, hey, do you know anybody who would maybe want to do a retreat? Nexus is opening to retreats, not just yoga teacher trainings anymore. And I was like, okay. That may have been like a little tap on the shoulder from the universe. And I went and spoke with them, and they're just beautiful human beings. And it just has all kind of fallen in place since then.
That's so awesome. And that's so that was one of the things I wanted to ask you about too. So when you are not performing in pole shows and planning pole retreats to address dancers holistically, you're also a personal trainer and certified nutritionist. Yeah.
Yes.
What is that like? I'm
curious. My specialty is sports nutrition. I think this all bloomed for me. My interest in training and nutrition bloomed for me while I was endurance racing. Simply because you have to have either some level of knowledge on your own or a willingness to completely blindly follow someone else. And I am not a blind follower ever. So I was like, but why do I need to eat like this? But why do I need these kind of carbs? And so all of my whys added up to this bigger picture of like, this is kind of what I need to do. And yeah, so that's kind of where it started. And I absolutely love it. I love creating sport specific training for people so that it's very focused on their sport, whether that's pole or surfing, or I actually train several collegiate lacrosse players as well. A couple of former professional athletes who are shifting gears and, coming out of more, what is it? They're calling it now, not impact sports, but I can't remember. There's like a more brutal name for it. I read it the other day in a study, and I was like, combat sports. I was like, okay. So
that makes sense.
I know. I was like, more accurate, but a little shocking.
Yeah.
But coming out of combat sports, if you will, and going into, cycling and those kinds of things. But it is, we talked about this. The off-pole training is so important, especially as you're getting started. I actually think it's important, throughout the duration, but I think it can be something that sidetracks or curbs your pole dancing future if you don't have kind of some of that instruction in the beginning, because you end up getting these weird, very unusual, because who else is hanging off of a pole? Nobody, so you start doing inverts or whatever, and you get these strange injuries, tendonitis or back pain or whatever. And we both have had the experience of having a doctor tell us, well, then just stop, and there's just so much more to it than that.
Right. I think, and I'm curious if this happens for some of the other, athletes that you work with, but pole becomes a bit of an identity, right? Like I'm a pole dancer. I'm like, yeah, I've got this day job, like work with managers, and then it's like I do pole dance, but I'm a pole dancer. Let's just be clear. I'm not going to let my day job define me. You take pole away,
Right.
and it's like, well, what do I have? Like and I've mentioned this before. I had an injury back in 2022 that was not, it was not a nothing injury. And I just remember crying, going, is this it? Did I have 7 years of pole and this is it? Like I had a good run. And then also this terrible part of me, because I think to do pole, you got to be like a touch psycho, right? To like hang off a metal bar, just a touch psycho. And the psycho part of my brain was like, and you never even did your Aisha in a show.
Like, this can't be the end.
Right. And like, really, we care about that. That's the most important thing right now. Not like I want to be 90 and still be able to lift a plate to put away and into a shelf higher than my head.
And so I tell my kids all the time, I'm like, I may not live to be very old, but when I'm done, my body's going to be used up. It's like I'm going to go out in the most glorious ball of flame, it's just not, I'm not, my thought process is not longevity. It's not like, well, it's not calm longevity. It's like, how long can I do this thing I love is where I am with it. And that is, honestly, strength training has gotten me there too. It keeps me put together longer, but I identify so much with that. But I never did my Aisha on stage. I'm with you on that.
Like the only people that saw my Aisha are on the gram. That sucks.
I needed to be seen in person. No. Well, there's what it is though? It's the adrenaline and endorphins we get from doing something that is risky and dangerous, like on stage where like failure's not an option. But that I think really plays into this primal place in our brain. And as women, we're asked to check that, especially once we become mothers, because we are no longer allowed to do anything dangerous. We have to live so that we keep the children alive.
Right.
And so, when we start tapping back into that and we're hanging upside down, I'm looking over into my dining room right now because that's where my pole is. Sorry. But yeah, we were like hanging upside down off of this metal pole, and everything in our being is like, you're going to die. Right. And there's, and then there's a part of my heart that's like, no, I'm not. And it feels great.
Right. There was this performance I did. It was an online performance, and I think it was like October of 2021. And my pole that I have is it's not pressure mounted. It's like put into a stud in the ceiling. So I get real good spin. I love it. But every once in a while, it makes like a loud sound. And I've had it checked out. It's totally normal. It's safe. It's fine. But this was the first time it made that sound, and it was on spin. And I was in the middle of my performance and I heard it make the sound, and I was spinning and I was upside down and I wasn't sure what was happening. And the performance was going live. Like I was being recorded on Zoom. And I thought to myself, oh my God, I should bail out. And then I was like, fuck it. I'm already upside down. If the pole goes down, I'm going with it. And maybe that was not the smartest thing in retrospect to think, but in all honesty, that's where my head was at the time. And nothing happened. The pole was fine. Everything was fine. There was nothing. It just, it just made a loud sound, probably because it was hot and, the weather was changing or something. And yeah, everything was fine. And you couldn't hear it in the performance, the viewers, because it's on Zoom and someone else was piping the music in. So everyone else only saw me, like I was on mute. And so all you could hear was the music, and I'm dancing to the music. But I had my camera set up in the room on the side, and you can hear the sound on the side. And my friends that saw the video later were like, weren't you scared? I'm like,
oh yeah.
we're in it. Like, if the pole's going down, like shit's going down, I mean, I'm just going to hope for the best and hope I make pole lulls because I didn't get like physically hurt. Right. Just my ego.
I know, but that is like that primal part of our brains though, that used to have to make split second decisions about like, do we go here or is there potentially a puma that's going to eat us?
Right.
And so in that moment, I think like you talking about your thought process, I have such similar ones where I'm like, I need to bail. No, I'm not going to bail. It can make it worse if I bail. No, I'm staying. I'm just going to go down with the pole. Like in all of that happening, like in like 1 second, that I totally identify with that. But I think as women, that's what we do. I think we are not alone. We are not alone.
Yeah. And I think that's probably the beauty of pole is you get to these places where you tap into that part of you and you realize that you're not alone. Like, oh shit, I'm not the only person in this room that, is suffering post baby, or I'm not the only person in this room that has sweaty hands. Thank God, like,
yeah. Or the classes that inevitably like there's a tampon string hanging out somewhere and it's fine. It's just fine. It's just what it is. And there's just so few of those spaces. I do believe that like my kids' generation is changing that. I think that there's going to be more and more and more of those kinds of like very welcoming spaces. But for those of us who are mothers right now, that are flocking to pole dancing and we're sending our older generations and well, honestly, some of our own generation, like they're worried about us.
Yeah.
They are deeply concerned with our well-being. And but that's why we're there. It's like, it's creating this space for, so many things that we need to kind of tap into and embody and work through and embrace about ourselves.
Yeah.
I do love that it has like come back full circle to that. You and I also talked about how I felt. I definitely feel, and I will say that this is my opinion, that the hashtag not a stripper set us back in that regard because it brought shame into our art and into our sport. And shame is never a good place for safe container, like then I feel like we kind of hit some bumpy road. I'm really, really happy that as a community, we're coming out of it.
Absolutely. I think that's something interesting that you've touched on, that creating a safe container, and we're flocking to these pole spaces because they're sacred to us. Being able to be yourself and exist just as yourself and explore why you feel the way you do, to remove armor and layers of shame. Like you said, they're not everywhere. Maybe the next generation is going to make more of those spaces available outside of a pole studio. But for now, there's very few spaces where women or feminine energy types can feel safe to be themselves. And for us, we hold those places sacred. So while the rest of the world might be clutching their pearls and keeping us in their prayers, we're at the church, right?
Exactly.
The church of self-love. Yeah.
Right. I mean, truly, like I think the pole studio for me is definitely church. It is the place that I have the most reckoning with myself, for sure. For sure. And I think it is true. We definitely, I know that there are some studios that are all women. That is not the case here in Asheville. I don't know a single studio here that's like women only. And some of those are very progressive women only studios. They're not doing it for any reason other than for whatever their potential, their purpose within their region is that. But we definitely have, I love that there is like gender fluidity and male dancers who come into our spaces, and that safety doesn't change at all. And I also feel like for the generation of us that are moms, that's a rare occurrence and has been for us as we grew up. That was not something that we as young girls were able to experience a lot. And I am feeling, every time I'm in a dance class or in the studio for open pole, and there is someone who is, not your, like, just you're very cis presenting female in there, it's like, it feels really, really good. And it feels like a place that our culture in general needs to walk. And I love that this industry that I love so much, and this art that I love so much, is leading the way with that. Because yeah, I mean, to know I can dance I could dance in a room full of male pole dancers and feel no lack of safety whatsoever. And I can say that I have danced and done gymnastics my whole life and did not necessarily feel that way in other venues. So I love that about pole too.
Yes, that's a very true statement. I'm glad you've had that experience. And I think it's interesting that, you started pole in 2021, born out of, kind of like Phoenix rising from the ashes here. And with that, I think Misty, it takes a very special kind of person to be like, I feel this energy and I am going to take this energy and put it into action. And that's what you've done with the work that you've done with the pole community. You dove right into shows. You're building something special through your retreats. And, I look at, it took me 7-8 years to find like my voice in pole. Like, I love it, but I'm not an action-based person like you are. And I find that really special. I really admire that about you.
Oh, wow. Thank you so much. I feel like it is, that is I do think it's part of my personality. It's just kind of the way I'm wired, but it also, that couldn't have developed without the community I have through pole dancing, through Enter the Garden. Those two, and those communities overlap greatly, but I do kind of see them as two different spaces. And there's no way I could have taken the action I did without it. As a matter of fact, one of the things that was so incredibly that it changed me deeply during the first Enter the Garden was, and I told the producers this, like I said, they're friends of mine. So I told them this like months later when I could collect myself. And I think I still cried when I told them. But it was legitimately the first time I had been, I was invited full throttle to participate with 100% of their confidence behind me. And every time I showed up and thought I was going to be too much, they were like, no, you're just right. Just keep doing you. And it was literally the first time, maybe ever in my life, that I wasn't too much at some point. Like, you want to do the wild makeup? Do the wild makeup. That sounds great. It was at no point did anybody say, don't go that route, or this, who you are isn't what we're looking for. And the times that it was like, okay, we like this, but we want you to be more. Let's level this up. Let me teach you how to do that trick. Let me be sure that you're confident in this. This looks great, but we actually need you to embody that snake more. And it was just that experience alone was so transformative for me. And so there's no way I could have taken the action I did, even going into the first Enter the Garden, without all of them behind me. And there's no way that this retreat would have been born without that. And then even with this retreat clearly trying to birth itself in my lap, I was still so resistant that it took these other 4 women coming beside me and being like, nope, we're doing this together. You're not alone. And so action is made a lot easier when you have community.
Yes, that's so special.
Yeah. And I think that was one of the reasons I was withering coming out of COVID. I had lost that. I had lost community. And so many of us had. And I not jokingly say COVID saved my life. I really think it did. Life as I know it anyway.
That's so beautiful. When you talked about not, taking up more space, being more, I had that conversation with my daughter over the weekend. I went to go see her perform in a show. It was her first big debut as like a leading character. And I have a background in theater. We talked about that. I have a pretty extensive background in theater. And so I'm sitting there trying to regulate my feelings because I'm not in theater anymore. And, it's for good reason, a lot of baggage there, right? So I'm trying to like come to grips with my demons, be supportive of her, but also with a keen eye because I know that she loves this. Like, how do I provide her, some guidelines for going forward if this is what she really wants to do? And one of the things that bugged me the most about her performance was that I felt that she didn't take up enough space on the stage. And I was so upset because I felt like I raised her better than that. And so
Yeah.
I talked to her about it afterwards. I'm like, how am I going to say this? I'm like, dear, the way you delivered your lines was so good. You really embodied your character. I loved your facial expressions. Your physical movement was fantastic. Really great for like, film or television. But, on the stage, you want your actions to be so big that they reach the back row of the theater. You want to take up so much space that everyone sees them. And she said to me, she's like, oh, well, the director told me I wasn't allowed to outshine the main character.
Oh.
And I was so upset because I wish she had told me that like during any time in the last 6 months that she was doing this production. And I was
like a role given to her.
Exactly. And I said, hey, if the main character or the lead actor can't carry their character, that's on them. You don't dim your light for anyone. You take up that space. And she's going out for another audition this weekend. And so we're talking about that. And I was like, don't ever listen to that. Okay. Like, if they have a huge problem with it, they'll come and talk to me because this is youth theater, right? Like, come on, I paid for them to be in the show, right? Like, they can give me that feedback, right? She just needs to keep on shining.
Right.
But I thought that was so sad. And, we think about things that like kids, take statements like that and they internalize them, right? Like, oh, I don't want to upstage so-and-so. I don't want to be too much. It's like, how dare they always be you. It's much, be much. It's never too much.
Be so much. If I could tell like my little 7-year-old gymnast self something, it would be just go be your wildest, most too much self, because it was the constant trying to rein in, to try not to like feel embarrassed or get in trouble. That inevitably, I think, is what caused, for me anyway, kind of an evolution within myself and within my sport, and even within my own life and the way I presented in the world after that. To kind of, it was painful. Like, right. It was painful. And then everything I did was like looking through these lenses of, is this too much? Am I going to embarrass myself? And then I missed out on so many opportunities. And it actually, I actually have never talked about this publicly. I've talked about this to my dear friends, but, so I had 2 home births, and it was actually the birth of, so like, I'm at home, I'm laboring, no drugs, no anything. This was something I fully decided on my own beforehand. I think that decision was made out of like this fear of being in a hospital, which may not be the safest place or the healthiest place to make a decision, but it did very intuitively feel good to me. And so I had my children at home, and it was after their births that I was like, oh, like I'm a freaking warrior. Like what am I doing? I lived my entire youth thinking that I was embarrassing. I mean, I just spit humans out of this portal between my legs. Like my whole body synced up to produce a human being. And my labors were not easy. They were not the hardest labors I've ever, heard anyone talk about, but they were both challenging in very different ways. And the fact that I was able just to, like, my too much is exactly what got my children here.
Exactly.
Like, I showed up too much. and got them here. And so that was the thing that shifted for me so much of my life. And I think that was the thing that I felt like was stolen from me from COVID. I also lost my dad during COVID, to cancer, not to COVID. And so there was several things that like shook my world during that time, and that I didn't have community to like hold me through. But man, I say all the time, I would have never endurance raced. I would have never raced Ironman. I would have never raced ultra marathons. I don't think I would be on a pole right now if I didn't have kids, because it showed me like this lioness inside of me that I never knew existed, or I didn't think was a good thing that it existed. I knew it was there and was constantly embarrassed of it.
My God, thank you for sharing, Misty. That's what a story. And I think that is probably one of the things about pole that is so special, right? Like it's more and more and more, like you said, you're out on the stage and suddenly all those, like, I'm sure you're like, oh, I want to do makeup. And there's probably a voice in your head when you were talking about doing the makeup, like, I hope that's okay. I hope they don't.
Real.
Right.
Yeah.
We take that voice of like, don't upstage so-and-so, or don't do this, or you'll get marked off if you go 1 foot out of bounds on that, on what is it? The floor routine, right?
Yeah. Don't step on the tape. Don't step on the tape.
Right.
But me too. Like I was this adjunct character and I was a last minute ad. And it was like, I was so afraid to make it something. And when the producer sat me down and they were like, for the love of God, make it something, make it whatever you want it to be. Everything you've told us is great. I literally I think I sat there for a second and looked at them. I was like, really? Like, are you sure? Like the pictures I sent you of the glow in the dark makeup, that's not too much. They were like, no, really, but it's that whole thing of like, it's the imposter syndrome, It's the imposter syndrome where we are so bad for that. Like, I'm not good enough. I'm not good enough to show up and glow. I'm not good enough to show up and shine. I'm not good enough to stand on stage and make that main character fight for their place. I'm not good enough for that. When in reality, if they didn't want her to upshine the main character, maybe they should have made her the main character.
Right. Oh, that's a whole conversation for another time. Oh my God.
Clearly main character energy.
I know, I was explaining to her about how, sometimes the main characters are cast before the auditions happen. And she was like, what? And I was like, oh, yeah. How do I put this delicately, but like still direct. It was very interesting having that conversation with her and then watching her resilience of like, well, I'm still going to audition. Like, and I'm like, that's it. You knock one of those like secondary characters out of that spot, right? You get that secondary role. Like Cinderella's been cast, but you might get the stepsister. Like, go for it.
Right. Yeah. And, but that's actually also how, those experiences where we're very tangibly, and God, how old is she? She's so young if she's in youth theater. I wish I'd had that experience where somebody was like, do you see that you dimmed yourself? And do you see that you could have done more? And I'm here to support you doing more.
Right. She'll be 11 soon. So, I mean, I guess she's not my little girl anymore. I got my first like attitude face from her a couple months ago. And I took a picture of it. I don't know why. I was like, oh, and I pouted and I took a picture of it. She's like, what are you doing? I'm like, I'm taking a picture of the first attitude face you're giving me. Like, you're not my little girl anymore. And she was like, oh.
I love this so much. Yeah. It's so funny because I'm constantly telling my kids, I have a boy and a girl. And then I have 3 more that are like adopted to me, that are 2 more boys and another girl. And I'm constantly telling them, I'm like, anything you've considered doing, I have already done. So I'm not actually like reading your mind. I'm just tapping back into what that face means. Cause I've given them that face before. Like I've given that face. But it's so funny that, my kids now just laugh at me about that. But my daughter who's 16, I can remember very vividly the first time I got attitude from her that was not like little girl attitude. It was teenager attitude. And I was like, oh, not so soon. This can't be happening yet. And I think there was a door slam involved. And I did the whole thing where I was like, I'll take that door off the hinges. I was never going to take the door off the hinges. Like, what was I thinking? I was like, what am I doing? I should have just taken a picture and sat still.
What's funny is my daughter has this sign on her door, and it's like, like when you're a teen, it'll be like the stay out, right? But my daughter says, knock first, please, smiley face. And I'm like, oh, she's setting boundaries in a polite way. All right, I'll knock first. Although this morning, all I wanted to do is take a shower this morning. Like, again, I should have just gotten up way earlier, but I was really tired and I didn't get a chance to shower before they woke up. So I made the decision that before they woke up, I was going to make breakfast and everything for everyone first, so they would have something to eat. And then while they were eating, I was going to take a really quick shower. And I come out of the shower and I hear screaming. And I'm like, what the fuck is going on? Like, I can't take a fucking shower without a fight breaking out. And it's this argument that has been brewing all week over my son's drumsticks, like to play the drums. Somehow my daughter asked him if she could use his drumsticks or borrow them. And she's almost twice his age. She's kind of sneaky in this way. Like, he said yes, thinking she would use them for 5 minutes. It's been 5 days. She hasn't given them back because she is using the drumsticks to knit a sweater. And she's not done with the sweater, obviously. And he's upset and he wants them back. So he keeps trying to run into her room to get his drumsticks back. And he's crying because he's so much younger than her. And he feels like this is this great injustice that has been done to him. And so I'm like, okay, like in my head, I'm like, don't swear at the kids. Don't swear at the kids. Come from a place of empathy, right? So I'm like trying to get them to understand. And, in her mind, she's like, I lost my other big knitting needle. So I had a pair and now I only have one. And I'm pretty sure my little brother had something to do with it. So I want to use his drumsticks because they're the right diameter to knit the sweater. And I'm like,
he's
okay.
responsible.
Yeah. Somehow he's at fault and he's crying. He wants it back. I'm like, okay, can I take the sweater off the drumsticks and put it on the one knitting needle and I will order you more knitting needles. Right. And she's like, okay. Yeah, that'll work. But then she's like, oh, but you can't do it because like it'll come unraveled. I'm like, trust me, I used to knit like a long time ago. I've taken apart many sweaters. And as I'm doing this, I'm like, I can't believe I'm fucking doing this right now. And my son's like wiping these big crocodile tears from his eyes, like trying to get himself together because he sees that he's going to get his precious drumsticks back. And like, I'm like, okay, can I get a clothing pin, please? And like, neither one of them knew what a clothing pin was. And they're downstairs. I'm like trying to describe what a clothing pin is to them as I'm trying to like unloop this sweater off the drumsticks and put it on one knitting needle. And finally he gets it back. I'm like, see guys, that wasn't so bad. But like, I was so annoyed that like, I knew this fight was brewing for days and I was really hoping they could resolve it themselves, but they just couldn't. And then as mom, you got to step in and like lay down the law. And the whole time I'm thinking, I don't think my husband listens to this podcast. The whole time I'm thinking, how the fuck did my husband let them make this deal? Like he was there when this happened and he let this go down knowing that this would probably happen while he's traveling and I'm solo parenting.
He's like, I got to go out of town this week. I'm really fine. You guys do whatever you want.
I think that's what he meant when I was traveling the week prior. So he was solo parenting and I got this text message that said, yeah, payback's a bitch. And I'm like, oh, really?
This is hysterical. Our kids, like, and this is why they're the best generation of kids because they are like, I was definitely a latchkey kid. Like I was the kid who was like, just came home alone, did everything alone. But they are not that. But we're also like, hey, honey, I'm going to use the kids as payback. They're like well taken care of and kind of used for our own entertainment.
Yes. I will hand it to him. I really appreciate the way my husband says, like, he doesn't say I'm watching the kids for you. No, he's taking care of the kids. They're his kids too. I appreciate that about him stepping up and like taking responsibility and, he wants some gold stars, but not like a ton of gold stars, right? Like he understands his responsibility in the process, right? And I think that's, over the years have definitely like thrown it in his face a lot to kind of like break that cycle. Like, hey, I've taken care of the kids and like held down the fort. Well, you've been gone into like whatever bad neighborhood of the world, like and when you're home, I expect you to be home and present with the family. The military gets you when they have you, but when they don't have you and you're home, you're part of this family and you need to step up. And he's done a good job of embodying that. And I think, but I don't know if some of the stuff that I'm going to bring it back to Paul, some of the transformation stuff that we talked about, I don't know if I hadn't had that I would be able to have those conversations with my partner, like knowing myself and then setting those boundaries so I can properly love and be loved by the people around me.
Well, we're only able to love other people in our world in as so much as we love ourselves. And if we love ourselves really shallowly, we'll love those around us really shallowly. And then also recognizing that from those around us, right? Like if we love ourselves deeply and we start to set boundaries, we start seeing who has deep love for us. And there's no way to shortcut that kind of skirts loving yourself. And you can't love yourself unless you can really, really, really kind of look inside. And I don't think there's a single version of pole. And I don't do pole sports, like, the like super, I do lots of tricks, but those girls who like do the, like minutes long trick routines are just so impressive to me. But I've never been able to do that. And so I can't speak from that, like having had that experience myself, but I know women who do. And I actually know one guy who does. And they all seem to have a similar experience to me, which is like more trick/dance. And I definitely do a lot of exotic, erotic kind of dance as well. There's no shortcutting it. You have to look at those places in yourself that you're maybe not quite sure about. Mm-hmm. And then you get this deeper love for yourself, and then you set boundaries from this place. It is this whole system that kind of, it's a domino effect. But I agree with you. Like I definitely would not be showing up in the world as well as I am right now and as happy as I am right now without pole. And I don't think I would be the mom I am. I mean, I just don't. I'm so happy. My kids will tell you that too. Like I'm the happiest mom they know. And I have a pole in the dining room and all of their friends come over and then we all get pole lessons. And I'm like, what are you going to tell your parents?
I feel the same way. I feel like I should just start charging the parents money when they send their kids over here. I'm like, It's a spotting fee. I'm spotting your kid through their first invert because they will not leave the pole alone until they learn something cool.
It's so funny. I wondered if it was just my friends' kids, because there's not a draw to it because it's off limits. Because I really believe nothing's off limits for this generation of kids. Like they don't believe anything's off limits to them. And I love that so much. But it is more, they're so curious and putting it on spin and just hanging on for dear life. It cracks me up.
Yeah.
I mean, it's true though, but I'm a very happy human and I'm a very happy mom. And I'm really happy to like have my kid, like all of their friends and all of my kids here to sort of, witness that. And I don't know that I could have done that, with teenagers, especially. Oh my goodness. It's so hard.
Yes.
Without pole having come along exactly when it did for me.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we all have that pole room in our house. And like you said, the kids, they don't see it as off limits. They don't see it as anything bad. It's fun for them. And it's the adults that put limitations on it. And so hopefully we're the generation that breaks that cycle. So I have a question for you. I ask this for every new person that I talk with. So you're a mom of 5 kids, 5 kids?
Yeah, 5 total, 2 biological. Yeah.
Yeah. So you're a mom of 5 kids. You're a personal trainer, certified nutritionist. You perform in shows. You're creating a pole retreat. That's a lot of work. So what goes? What do you say, you know what, this isn't happening, or I'm going to drop this when life just gets too busy?
It's probably not the best thing for my business, but it's social media, honestly. Like what goes for me. And that is honestly what takes up so much of my time with my business too, is creating the social media presence. And I find that creating a social media presence takes me out of the present. and I am no longer present with my kids. I'm no longer present in my life. So when I start feeling super stretched, that's the first thing that goes. 100%, like my personal stuff, my business stuff, everything just goes for 24 hours, sometimes longer. And then outside of that, I really feel, honestly, and it's not the healthiest thing, I feel like I kind of hermit. I'll hermit with my kids, and I'll cut out like socializing and those kinds of things. I can't do that for too long, though. I do recognize that that's not good for me long term. But if it's something for today, like today is just insane, and I'm running from one thing to the next, what's got to go. It is unfortunately whatever that social date is for today. And that's another reason I think that my pole community, and like my community in general now, is made up of so many pole dancers, that the bounce back isn't so bad. When I'm like, okay, I'm swamped. And I actually have so many friends now who recognize my withdrawal pattern when I start getting overwhelmed. And I'll start having friends that reach out and they're like, you're doing that thing again where you go in your shell. So you okay? You want to just like, do whatever, do something together. Do you want to come dance? But those are my two. I think those are my two things. The thing I give up easily and will willingly is social media. And then after that, it's that I recognize I kind of start cutting social stuff. My kids, until they're out on their own and have their own lives, will be such a big priority to me. I don't know that I'll, that's going to have to be more important than work and all of the things for a few more years. And that is totally okay with me.
Absolutely. Oh, well, that's beautifully said. Really great. I admire the social media. I wish I had that discipline. I'm on social media way too much.
I mean, when you have a business though, like when you have anything that's outside of, it's required in today's world, and it is really hard.
It really is. It's really challenging. So props to you there for setting good, healthy boundaries for yourself and your family. If people want to learn more about Tribu and the pole retreats that you're doing, where can they go?
So easy website address, like to get directly to it, is Tribu Fit Life, TRIBU fitlife.com. And you'll hit a landing page and choose retreats. You can also Tribu Fitness and Dance on Instagram. My personal Instagram is Misty_MTN for mountain _ hoppin', like the Grateful Dead song, Misty Mountain Hoppin'. Nice. And so both of those have a link tree that can get you to the resorts, to the retreat website as well. And then also both of those have links to Enter the Gardens social media page. And our next show will be in November, which just got announced. I think I'm okay to tell everybody that. Our next show just got announced for mid-November. And that is really exciting. It's going to be a whole new plot line, a whole new everything. And it's going to be at this massive old theater in downtown Asheville called the Diana Wortham. So we're so excited about that. So it's going to be a little different in every way for us, but that's all coming up as well. And then I was hoping to have dates to kind of give you today, but I'm definitely working on retreats for the future. There'll be one more in 2023 here stateside, and then another 2 more in Central America in 2024.
That's super exciting. Yeah. When you get those dates, send them to me, especially because I know I record and then sometimes there's a little bit of lag time. I think, so maybe if you get them soon, then we can pop them into the show notes for people. Okay. So, but in any case, anyone listening, if they're not looking at the show notes or we don't have those dates for you by the time this episode goes live, please feel free to hit up Misty's website or her Instagram pages, and you can stay up to date on all of the awesome happenings. Misty, It was such a pleasure speaking with you. So much fun. I know we went over. Oh, well, it happens.
I love that though. This is like having coffee with a friend. It's great. We have to cover all of it.
Right, exactly. It was definitely a pleasure speaking with you. We'll have to chat more soon. Maybe after the retreat, we can do a little chat again and see how it went. And maybe you'll come out all energized with something new for the future that you'll love to share with us. I love that you're such a creator and you're such a doer. This is so exciting.
Yeah.
So
Thank you so much. I would love that.
awesome, awesome. Well, thank you so much, and I'm sure we will talk again soon.
All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for listening to today's episode, my friends. If you enjoyed today's episode, please feel free to give us a big thumbs up, 5-star, like, subscribe, depending on what modality you happen to be listening in on. Check out the show notes below for ways that you can support this podcast, which is currently fueled by copious amounts of afternoon coffee by yours truly and a passion for supporting women in their pole and movement journeys. Until next time, my friends, keep on dancing and remember there's enough spotlight for all of us to shine.